The city skyline glittered like scattered diamonds beyond my office window, but my eyes lingered on the soft reflection of my own face in the glass. The woman staring back at me, sleek black blouse, hair pinned in a careful twist, looked every inch the poised marketing director I had fought to become. But tonight, that reflection felt paper-thin. My phone buzzed on the desk, the sound slicing through the hush of the after-hours floor. I reached for it, my pulse kicking up as I read the name glowing on the screen, Mom. It had been almost 8 years since that night. 8 years since the words that had scorched themselves into my memory. You're no daughter of mine. Even now, the echo of my father's shout could tighten my chest like a fist. I swallowed hard, the faint taste of coffee still on my tongue. Part of me wanted to let the call fade into silence, to keep the carefully walled-off parts of my life untouched. But something, a tug I couldn't quite name, made me swipe to answer. Hello. My voice came out steady, but my knuckles whitened around the phone. Samantha, my mother said, her tone cautious, almost brittle. We need to talk. Your father and we're in town. The words slipped through the line like a draft from an old door, carrying with them every memory I'd tried to lock away. The night it all unraveled is burned into me like a scar. I was 17, barefoot in the hallway, the worn carpet prickling against my toes as I clutched the white plastic stick in my fist. 2 pink lines. The world outside my bedroom window was quiet, crickets humming in the summer dark, but inside our house, the air pulsed with a different kind of noise. My heartbeat, a restless drum of fear. When I finally stepped into the living room, my parents were side by side on the couch. Dad looked up from the evening news, his brow already knitting at the sight of my tear-streaked face. I need to tell you something, I whispered. My voice wavered like a candle flame. Mom's hands folded in her lap. What is it, honey? I held out the test. No words, just the proof. The silence that followed was sharper than any shout. Dad's jaw tightened. The muscles in his face went rigid. You're pregnant? His voice cracked like a snapped branch. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. The storm came fast. Dad shot to his feet, the recliner rocking back with a thud. You're 17, Samantha. 17. His face flushed deep crimson. You're no daughter of mine, if you're making choices like this. Each syllable struck like a slap. Mom pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. David, she started, but he cut her off with a single glance, eyes blazing. I felt my own tears spill hot and relentless. My fingers shook as I held the hem of my t-shirt, twisting it into knots. I had never felt so small, so weightless, like the floor might give way beneath me. Mom finally rose and came to my side, but her touch was hesitant, unsure. The distance in her eyes told me everything. She was torn between the man she married and the daughter she'd raised. That night, after the shouting dulled to mutters and then to silence, I sat on the edge of my bed clutching my grandmother's locket. She'd given it to me on my 16th birthday, simple silver, etched with a tiny wildflower. For when you need courage, she'd said, pressing it into my palm. I traced the delicate petals with my thumb and made a quiet vow. If my own family could turn their backs, then I would build something no one could take away. For myself. For the tiny heartbeat I carried. I packed a small duffel before dawn. Just clothes, the locket, and the thin envelope of babysitting money. As the first pale light crept across my room, I closed the door behind me, not knowing when or if I'd ever open it again. The bus pulled away from my parents' street with a low hiss, and with it went the last trace of the life I'd known. My duffel bag rested against my knees. Inside, the silver locket warmed beneath my palm like a steady pulse. I spent the first nights on a friend's couch, a classmate named Rachel whose mother welcomed me without a single raised eyebrow. She didn't ask for details. She just handed me a folded quilt and said, "You'll figure it out, sweetheart." Those words, simple, almost casual, became a quiet refrain when the nights stretched long and heavy. Days blurred into weeks. I finished high school through the district's alternative program, often with swollen ankles and a back that ached as if I'd aged decades. I worked the evening shift at a diner, the smell of fryer grease clinging to my clothes, and tucked away every tip in a coffee tin under the bed. When my daughter, Lily, arrived, her tiny fist no bigger than my thumb, something inside me crystallized. Fear gave way to a fierce, almost electric clarity. I would give her a life built on more than survival. A social worker at the hospital introduced me to Evelyn Grant, a retired marketing executive who volunteered with young mothers. Evelyn had a presence that filled a room without a single raised voice, crisp white blouses, a silver streak through her dark hair, and eyes that seemed to see straight through excuses. "You've got grit," she said the first time we met, after hearing how I'd finished school and saved for diapers. "Grit can take you far if you pair it with skill." Under her guidance, I enrolled in community college, majoring in communications. Evelyn taught me how to network, how to pitch ideas, how to make people listen. She drilled into me that marketing wasn't about slogans, it was about understanding hearts. Money was always tight. I studied during Lily's naps, worked nights at the diner, and sometimes fell asleep over textbooks, waking with pages imprinted on my cheek. There were moments when doubt whispered like a draft under the door. "You're too young, too tired, too alone." But every time, the locket's cool curve between my fingers anchored me. Small victories began to stack up. A local boutique hired me to manage their social media, my first real client. The account grew fast, their sales followed. Soon, another store owner called, then another. By 21, I was juggling enough clients to quit the diner and rent a tiny two-room apartment for Lily and me. I kept my success quiet. Old acquaintances from my hometown sent occasional messages, "How are you?" But I gave only polite, vague replies. I never mentioned the growing list of clients or the modest savings account that finally felt like a safety net. By 25, with Evelyn's help and my own restless drive, I launched Hayes Creative Strategies. It started in that small apartment, just a laptop on a thrifted desk. Within 2 years, our campaigns were winning regional awards and drawing national clients. Through it all, I never reached out to my parents. They didn't know about the business, the apartment, or the daughter whose laughter filled every corner of my life. I told myself it didn't matter. Yet, on quiet nights, when the city outside our window hummed and Lily's soft breathing was the only sound, I would touch the wildflower etched into my grandmother's locket and wonder if my parents ever thought of us, if they regretted the words that had once sent me running. The knock on my office door was soft but sure, the kind that carried history. I had been expecting it ever since Mom's hesitant phone call the night before. "Come in," I said, my voice even though my chest felt like it might splinter. When the door opened, my parents stepped in together. For a heartbeat, I barely recognized them. Dad's once black hair had silvered along the edges, and Mom clutched her handbag like it might anchor her. The office around us gleamed in the late afternoon light, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the New York skyline, polished oak shelves lined with books and awards. A wall of framed campaign posters bore the logo of Hayes Creative Strategies in clean white letters. My daughter's school photo smiled from a silver frame on my desk. Next to it, my grandmother's locket rested like a quiet sentinel. Mom's eyes swept the room, wide with something between awe and disbelief. Dad's gaze caught on the awards before flicking back to me. "You've done well," Mom said finally, her voice soft, almost apologetic. Dad cleared his throat. "This is yours?" "All of it," I answered, folding my hands on the desk. "I built this company. We manage national marketing campaigns now, tech firms, fashion labels, nonprofits. We're expanding to the West Coast next year." The silence stretched. The air conditioning hummed, a low counterpoint to the quick rhythm of my own pulse. Dad finally exhaled, the sound shaky. "You did this while raising a child?" "Her name is Lily," I said, allowing a small smile. "She's 8, bright, stubborn, and the best thing that ever happened to me." Mom's eyes glistened. She took a step forward, then another, as if drawn by something she didn't quite understand. We thought," she broke off, covering her mouth. "We thought you'd be lost. We were so afraid, Samantha. And we were wrong." The memory of that night, the slam of his voice, "You're no daughter of mine," rose sharp as glass. I let the silence hold it. Dad looked down, the lines around his mouth deepening. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat again. I was angry.
Scared.
I said things I can't take back. For a long moment, I simply studied him. The man who had once towered like a mountain now seemed smaller, his shoulders slightly stooped, the weight of years and regret bowing him. I built this, I said finally, gesturing around the room, because I had to. For Lily. And for me. I didn't have your blessing. But I had my grandmother's locket. I touched the silver wildflower, and the belief that I could be more than a mistake. Mom reached for my hand across the desk. You are so much more than we ever imagined. Her voice trembled. We failed you when you needed us most. Dad raised his eyes. What now? You have every reason to shut us out. But if you can, let us know our granddaughter. We'd be grateful. And proud. The words landed like a long-delayed apology. I let the moment stretch, the city's distant horns and hum filling the space. I thought of Lily's laughter, of the quiet nights spent tracing the locket's wildflower. You can meet her, I said at last. My voice carried both steel and mercy. But this is my life. My terms. If you want to be part of it, it starts with respect, for me and for the little girl who saved me. Dad nodded slowly, the tension in his jaw easing. Mom squeezed my hand, tears sliding freely now. For the first time in 8 years, the silence between us felt less like a wall and more like a door, one we might finally learn to open. I rose from my chair and moved to the wide window, the evening sun spilling molten gold across the city. Below, traffic shimmered in long ribbons of red and white. I took a slow breath, the weight of the moment settling over me like a soft, heavy quilt. Behind me, I heard Dad shift his feet. We'll do whatever it takes to make things right, he said quietly, his voice a notch lower than I'd ever heard it. I turned to face them. This isn't just about making things right for me, I said. It's about Lily. If you want to be in her life, she needs to know that she's loved and safe, and that you see her mother for who she really is. Mom clasped her hands together. Of course. We want that. We'll show her. I stepped closer, my heels clicking against the polished floor, each sound steady and deliberate. Here's what that means. Their eyes followed me as I laid it out, not as a threat, but as a blueprint. First, I said, meeting Dad's gaze, you never speak down to her or to me. Not once. No judgment about how she came into this world. You accept that the path I took is valid, and that Lily is a blessing, not a mistake. Dad nodded once, his face solemn. Second, I continued, if you want to see us, you show up. No half-hearted promises. Birthdays, school plays, Saturday mornings at the park. If you say you'll be there, you're there. Mom's chin trembled. We will. We'll be there. And finally, I said, softening my tone, you let go of the old anger, the fear that made you say what you said. You start fresh, with Lily, with me, and with yourselves. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the city seeped through the glass like a distant tide. Dad swallowed hard. I can do that, he said, voice rough but steady. I want to do that. Mom stepped forward until she stood just a breath away. We both do, she whispered. I searched their faces, looking for any shadow of the people who had once turned me away. What I found instead was something new, an openness I'd never seen, a willingness to bend. I placed the silver locket in my palm, the wildflower gleaming faintly in the fading light. My grandmother's quiet courage had carried me through years of silence and struggle. Now it guided me again. These are my conditions, I said, closing my fingers around the locket. This is how we heal. Not by forgetting, but by choosing something better. Dad lowered his gaze, then lifted it again, eyes shining. We choose better, he said. Starting now. Mom reached for my hand, and this time I let her take it. Her grip was warm and steady. For the first time in nearly a decade, I felt the old hurt loosen, like a knot finally beginning to give way. The days that followed were quiet revolutions. My parents didn't rush in with grand gestures or overcompensating apologies. Instead, they showed up, softly, steadily, consistently. Saturdays became park mornings with Lily, homework help in the evenings, and long walks where words of old regrets were replaced by laughter and conversation. I watched them change in real time. Dad learned to listen before reacting, his temper softened by the gentle insistence of love. Mom, who had once seemed fragile when confronting conflict, found her own voice again, one that balanced concern with respect. And Lily, perceptive as children are, noticed the difference immediately. Her shy smiles toward them began to bloom into open, joyful laughter. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit in my office chair and touch the silver wildflower of my grandmother's locket. I could almost hear her whisper, "See how far you've come, Samantha." It was more than a memory now. It was a testament to resilience, a quiet reminder of the courage I had carried through every sleepless night and every small victory. I reflected on the woman I had become. Not perfect, not unscarred, but unshakable. The years of hardship, the nights spent crying over textbooks or pacing the tiny apartment with a baby in my arms, had forged a strength I could feel in my bones. And it wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving, about creating a life where love and success could coexist without apology. One evening, as I tucked Lily into bed and kissed her forehead, she whispered, "Mom, I'm proud of you." Her words, so simple, so pure, filled a hollow I had carried for years. That pride, coming from the little girl I had raised, was the final proof that my choices had been worth every struggle. I returned to the living room afterward, the locket glinting in the soft lamplight. I placed it back on the shelf next to Lily's school photo, letting it rest among the symbols of our journey. It wasn't just an object anymore. It was a story, a reminder that courage, love, and perseverance could reshape even the deepest wounds. And as I looked out the window at the city skyline, the hum of life below, I realized something. I had built a world that could not be shaken by the anger of the past. A world where my daughter and I could flourish. I whispered to the night, softly but firmly, "I am no longer the girl they tried to break. I am the woman I was always meant to be."